Ever since the four kings of boxing had vacated their thrones, the world had waited for a rivalry that could recapture the electricity of the incredible battles between Hearns, Hagler, Duran, and Leonard. On November 18, 1994, they would get their wish as James Lights Out Toney and Roy Jones Jr. engaged in what was dubbed the Uncivil War, a fight to determine the pound-for-pound pinnacle of the sport in that era. Fans and pundits alike had been eager for this middleweight showdown ever since Jones crashed a post-fight presser, a move that sparked an intense rivalry. In the following years, the two operated on parallel tracks towards the #1 pound-for-pound spot, and now they were on a collision course to determine the best of the era. They say styles make fights, and these two were exact opposites. Though 26 years old, James Toney was extremely experienced thanks to a busy schedule that saw him fight nearly once a month until he captured his first championship. At 44-02 with 29 KOs, the Ann Arbor native had already captured 2 weight class titles and defended them multiple times with stunning results. His style was one of tanking terror, moving through shots with an ironclad Philly shell before unleashing with brutal, mind-bending counterpunches. With an anywhere, anytime warrior's spirit, he was motivated to prove that Jones was not on his level. That aside, Toney reportedly had an awful, arduous 30-pound weight cut to get to 167 pounds, something that Jones, who was moving up in weight, wouldn't have to worry about. Even with the 26-0 record and a sky-high 88% KO rate, many saw Roy Jones Jr. as a bit of an unproven commodity due to somewhat questionable matchmaking in the past. No one doubted his talent, blinding speed, or unmatched dynamic footwork, but they wondered if his high-risk, brazen, open style would work against the upper echelon of the squared circle. Toney was no gatekeeper, he was the final boss. Few times in boxing history has so much talent lived within the ropes. The mix of styles, so distinct, was enough to drive boxing experts crazy as they tried to imagine how the contest would play out. As boxing writer Bert Sugar put it, Jones moves, Toney is immovable. What no one imagined was that the fight would come down to one brilliant moment in the very early rounds. When fighters are this elite, the first man to stumble or show a flash of weakness might lose. The first bell sounded, and it was clear that as much animosity had shadowed the build-up, the two had immense respect for the skillful danger each was capable of. Toney started by mapping out Jones' attacks, barely responding with punches of his own, content to let Jones lead the dance. He deftly dodged and blocked, remaining stubbornly elusive to Jones' punches. When Jones threw his signature gazelle hooks, Toney ducked and pulled under with his Philly shell. For the remainder of Jones' punches, Toney found his nuanced high guard to be more than enough to get the job done. Now the champion decided it was time to switch gears, but for all of his defensive successes, the pound-for-pound great was having an equally difficult time landing on Jones.
That's not a problem, I guess, when you know you have a 12-rounder and you believe you can knock a guy out, and I think that's what Toney has in mind.
Yeah, well, you're not necessarily sure he conceded this first round. We're only halfway through.
He tried a roll and counter right, but Jones shut down Toney's signature counter with the mere forearm block. Both seemed to know what the other intended to do before they did it, like high-stakes poker players that are both using mirrors to peek at each other's cards. With 30 seconds left in the round, Jones tried a no-touch jab, breaking his rhythm to surprise Toney. He connected with a tremendous right that would have been the end of most of his previous bouts, but Toney rolled in time to take the edge off. And just like that, the first round, a boxing masterclass that few watching truly comprehended, was in the books. But typical boxers, a slow first round, the feel-out round, would be normal. But with these two boxing titans, it was astonishing that neither had found a single successful tactic on which to build. In round 2, Toney was finished feeling things out. He wanted to put Jones in his place, moving forward behind his two guards, looking to crush Jones once he closed the distance. But even though he could walk Jones to the ropes, he couldn't stop him from slipping away like a matador from a bull. With his offense blunted, Toney should have been able to look to his counters. But Roy Jones Jr. showcased his ability to turn his spent punches into frames, sticking Toney in place and denying him the movement he needed to evade and land counters. Their opposite defensive styles were more prevalent now than ever. Toney relied on an airtight guard, while Jones floated away from attacks using his open, long guard to repel stray shots. Despite these differences, both men were completely successful, resulting in a near stalemate. In round 2, there was still nothing of consequence from either side. But that would all change drastically in the very next round. Sometimes, when an opponent's technique and style is flawless, that's when you have to attack their mind. Jones started showboating.
He was actually just gaining his balance. Exactly. And now the body work from Toney. Some big headshots there from Jones.
Taunting Toney, even grabbing the ropes.
Seemingly thinks he knows what he has to do, and that's to put the pressure on.
He took it up another step, flaring both arms out to his sides, sticking his chin forward to show he was wide open. This was a tried and true feint he often used. Inspired by watching roosters fight as a boy, he would force opponents to guess whether a lead hook or right overhand was coming. But this was the first time he'd ever just stayed put, highlighting his vulnerabilities like a big, flashing neon open sign. Up to this point, Toney's technique had been flawless, but here, his ego cracked. Stepping outside himself to mirror Jones. Jones responded in kind, but this time, he didn't stay put. Instead, he hurled himself forward before Toney could get his guard back up, catching him flush on the chin with a wicked quick gazelle hook. And now, Toney was paying for a mental lapse with physical consequences, stumbling back under Jones' assault. Lights Out flailed his arms for balance as Jones tracked him to the corner, narrowly avoiding a follow-up hook and cross as he crashed into the ropes. Toney held onto them like a life raft, but it didn't matter. James Toney suffered only the second official knockdown of his career. He beat the count, and now he was desperate to get back at Jones. Even if the punches that Jones landed for the knockdown hadn't hurt him, the mental battle he just lost clearly did. He pursued Jones for the remainder of the round, but his tactics were no longer well thought out. They were rushed, thrown from rage, and simply devoid of rhythm. Toney would have to find a way to get himself back together, because Roy Jones Jr. was showing no signs of slowing down.
So far, it's been all we figured it would be. Jones scoring the knock.
Street, ring, anywhere, you wouldn't want to fight either one of these guys, especially Roy. It'll work for him tonight as well.
He is so quick. Toney is right now finding out that he may not have the quickest hands in the sport.
Toney's high-pressure offense relied on his ability to evade as he moved through space. His further ability to counterpunch kept opponents gun-shy, shutting down their offense. But this can't work if the opponent lands first, and that's exactly what Jones was doing. Toney had not regained his composure, and he was still rushing in, out of position, overreacting to everything Jones was doing.
Plus, to take some gate receipts, and there's Toney getting hit with some lefts and some rights.
Jones pulled further and further ahead over the next several rounds, building on his attacks to find new ways to leverage his pronounced speed advantage. Jones shortened his gazelle hook, trading a bit of power to accurately and quickly track Toney's pullback motion, catching him at the very start of his head movement.
So far, Roy Jones Jr., good left hook, and Toney had to grab on there. He lost 3.5 years. Toney's been a champion. And they're talking to one another now. Good body work from Jones.
From there, he added lead uppercuts and straights to further punish Toney's low head slots.
Toney, but not as big as it appeared.
Look at Steele, though. He's getting in the way too much here. He's got to let these guys fight.
When Toney tried to dip and pivot, Jones would deftly circle, sometimes all the way around to his back. Jones' ability to seemingly transport behind his competitors was always astounding, but no one suspected it could happen to James Toney. Toney's low stance was great for stability, but it wasn't ideal for quick movement changes, which Jones excelled at thanks to his high stance and natural speed. The Philly shell position relies on staying closed off by lining up your center line to your opponent's, but Jones wasn't staying on the center line strip. He sidestepped with nearly every punch, and as he circled, he turned Toney's narrow stance into a squared-up, target-rich liability.
Left and right. Toney getting hit by some big shots from Jones in the center of the ring. Left hook has been the best shot there, and Toney hurt by that shot. Swinging wildly. Some headshots, and they're piling up for Jones, the challenger. He backs Toney up, and this is not a scene that you'll see very often. Here comes Jones. Has Toney in his corner. Pounding him to the head, but left to right. Toney fires.
He's got to let these guys fight a little bit more.
And that just fired up Roy Jones in the final 10 seconds. A street fight now in the middle of the ring. What is Richard still doing there?
He heard the...
It's a 10-second warning. What a bad move by Richard Steele. I hate to say it because I know Richard personally. And right when the fight was beginning to turn into an alley fight.
During rounds 9 through 11, Jones was able to just bleed the clock by darting from side to side, pot-shotting his way into a clinch, or circling safely to the center of the ring. Chants of Toney rang out through the arena, his fans trying to spur him to victory, to a sudden change in fortune. While he was far behind, he'd been here before. Down on the scorecards and a heavy underdog, he won his first world title with a comeback 11th round knockout. But that was then. If a miracle was gonna happen, it would happen in the 12th. And in the opening moments of the final frame, Toney marched forward through clear exhaustion, poking out his mouthguard to gasp oxygen. He used his patented pressure and feints to crowd Jones to the ropes, but his opponent remained elusive, even this far into the fight. And though Jones was within minutes of victory, he still let loose with serious, impactful shots, but remained mindful enough to clinch whenever Toney got too close for comfort. But to Toney's credit, these tactics did little to dissuade him from chasing victory, even as his punches looked more and more desperate. With 20 seconds left, Toney whiffed to counter right so hard he stumbled into southpaw. Jones was on him with a Superman-like leap, and Jones circled him, slapping him with a cascade of left hands.
Get more aggressive in the final 10 seconds. It's over, and I think it's over for the champion, at least as the super middleweight champion.
The final bell rang out. Jones immediately lifted his hands in victory before his coaches lifted him, presenting him to the hallowed halls of generational greatness. The judges' scorecards made it official. Roy Jones Jr. was the new super middleweight champion and the pound-for-pound best in the world. In the end, it had been a psychological tactic. What you take into the ring can affect the fight, a lesson we would all do well to remember. My skill-building ebooks and our graphic novel Mortal Weapons is linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.